Hello, grade 11s. Here's our next section, which is 6.2, multiplying and dividing rational expressions. So remember, these are fractions, so they follow all the same rules as multiplying and dividing fractions. So let's look here. When you multiply a rational expression, you follow the procedures, again, similar to fractions. So the general rule is top times top and bottom times bottom. So again here, for this first little example, 5 times 4 is 20, 8 times 15 is 120, which gives us 1/6. Now there is a little way that you can make this simpler for yourself. If I were looking at this question, I would see that 5 goes into 15 3 times, so I would divide those right away. And 4 goes into 8 2 times. So really then what I actually have on the top is 1 times 1, so 1, and 2 times 3, so 6. So when I'm doing fractions, I like to try to reduce them earlier in order to have less simplifying later. Let's take a look at this next one. 4x squared times y squared is 4x squared y squared. 3xy times 8x is 3 times 8, so 24. X times x is x squared, and then the y. Again, what I could have done here is did some canceling ahead of time. So I see I have an x squared on the top and an x on the bottom, which is x squared. So all of the x's would be gone. I notice that 4 goes into 8 2 times, and then y squared would cancel with the y on the bottom, so you'd just be left with one of the y's on top. So you're left with a y on top, and then the 3 times the 2 on the bottom, so 6. So again, if you simplify earlier, that might be beneficial for you, but you don't have to do it that way. Okay, let's try example 1. We're going to multiply rational expressions, and here's the steps. First, we're going to factor fully, and then we will find non-permissible values. After that, we'll multiply and simplify, but again, you could do that backwards and simplify and then multiply. It's up to you. So let's look here. The first part, when we factor it, I'm looking for two numbers that add to get to -1 and multiply to -12, which would be a minus 4 and a plus 3. Then on the bottom, it's a difference of squares. So a squared minus 9 is a plus 3 and a minus 3. Again, factor everything first. For the next one, I'm looking for two numbers that add to get to -4 and multiply to get to +3. So that would be a minus 3 and a minus 1. And then on the bottom, I noticed there that there's an a that's common, so I could divide out an a, and then I'm left with a minus 4. So next step then is non-permissible values. So the non-permissible values, again, I look at the denominator and see what I'm not allowed to have. So I'm not allowed to have an a as a -3, because that would make this first factor 0. I'm not allowed to have an a as a +3, because that would make the second factor 0. I'm not allowed to have a as a 0, because that would make this a 0. And I'm not allowed to have a as a 4, because that would make this next factor 0. So there's 4 non-permissible values here. Next step, you can either multiply them all together and simplify, or simplify and then multiply. So when I look at this, I actually see there's some things on the top that can cancel with some things on the bottom already. So I could simplify the a minus 3 and the a minus 3 by dividing them out. I could simplify the a plus 3 and the a plus 3 by dividing them out. And I could simplify the a minus 4 and the a minus 4 by dividing them out. Now when I go to multiply, this side actually I'm just left with 1 on the top and the bottom. So really on the top here I have 1 times a minus 1, which is a minus 1. And on the bottom I just have 1 times a, so just a. So that would be the simplified version when you multiply these two things together. Again, pause the video at any time if you are a little bit behind with your copying. All right, let's try the next one here. Again, step 1, factor fully. So when I look at the top here, y squared minus 9, that's a difference of squares. So it would be y minus 3 and y plus 3. On the bottom, r cubed minus r. I notice that there's an r common. When I divide out that r, I'm left with r squared minus 1. But r squared minus 1 is actually a difference of squares. So I'm going to rewrite that as r plus 1 and r minus 1, again, since it's a difference of squares. On the other side here, I have r squared minus r, so again, I'm going to remove an r divide it out, and I'm left with r minus 1 once I divide out an r. And on the bottom, it's already factored, y plus 3. Then let's go to our non-permissible values. So looking at the denominators here, r cannot equal 0, -1, or 1. 0 because this r would be 0, -1 because this would be 0, or +1 because that would be 0. And y cannot equal -3 because that would make this other factor, y plus 3, 0. So we have 4 different non-permissible values. Now again here, you have 2 options. You either multiply them all together first, or you simplify first and then multiply. So this one I'm going to show you backwards. I'm going to multiply them all together. So top times top, we get y minus 3 times y plus 3 times r minus 1. In the bottom, we have r times r plus 1 times r minus 1 times y plus 3. So I've multiplied them all together. They're all just stuck right together. Now we can go through simplifying. So I see there's an r that can be divided out, an r minus 1 that can be divided out, and a y plus 3 that can be divided out. So that leaves me with a y minus 3 in the top and an r plus 1 in the bottom for your final answer. Now dividing is very similar to multiplying. When you divide rational expressions, remember, you flip the second fraction and then multiply. So the rule of thumb is flip and then multiply. You already know how to multiply, so all you have to add in here is the flip. So again, if this was 1/6, you'd flip it into 6/1 and then multiply things together. Let's try an example. So here, again, step 1 is factor. So we're still gonna factor everything fully. So the top here I notice is a difference of squares. So x minus 2 and x plus 2. The bottom and x can be removed, and I'm left with x minus 4. Again, I've got dividing here. When I factor the top here, I'm looking for 2 numbers that add to get to 1 and multiply to get to minus 6. So that's x plus 3 and x minus 2. And in the denominator, again, add to 1, multiply to minus 20. That's x plus 5 and x minus 4. Okay. Next, when you're dividing, again, you do have to flip it. So the second part here is going to get flipped. So we have x minus 2 and x plus 2 on this side. And then again, I just flipped the other side. Now there's one little catch with non-permissible values here, because remember we do non-permissibles before we simplify. So I see that x on this side can't equal 0 and it can't equal 4. But on this other side, I actually have to look at both the top and the bottom of the fraction because when it flips, there's 2 different parts that are on the bottom. So originally, x plus 5 and x minus 4 is on the bottom, which means, again, I can't have -5 or +4, which I've already included. But now once I've flipped it, I have these new factors on the bottom. So I also have to include -3 and +2 for my non-permissibles. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 non-permissible values here. Okay, final step, let's do the multiplying and the simplifying. So now that I've got it flipped, I see that the x minus 4 can cancel by dividing it out, and the x minus 2 and the x minus 2 can be divided out. So I'm left with x plus 2 and x plus 5 on top, and on the bottom, I'm left with x and x plus 3 for your final answer. I'd like you to try this next one on your own. It's a division question, and your answer should be c divided by c plus 7. So let's see if you can get that on your own, and I've also listed the non-permissibles at the bottom. And finally, the textbook questions for this section are on page 327, numbers 1, 2, 8, and 9. Remember that I'm just giving you the bare minimum in textbook questions, so please make sure you go through these and ask if you have any questions. Have a great day, you guys.